Becky clutched her bouquet tightly as she stood before the empty chair reserved for Tristan. The sun filtered through the stained glass of the old chapel, casting rainbow hues across the room, but all she saw was that vacant spot, a painful reminder of the son she had lost far too soon. Her heart ached with equal measures of love and longing, and tears welled up in her eyes as she read the sign dedicated to Tristan. But Becky's thoughts were interrupted by Kelly's gentle touch on her arm. His eyes, kind and full of a secret he was barely containing, softened as he spoke. "There's someone here who wants to meet you," he whispered. Puzzled, Becky wiped a tear from her cheek, searching Kelly's face for an explanation, but he simply nodded toward the doorway. The murmurs of their wedding guests hushed, and all eyes turned to see who was approaching. A tall young man stepped forward, his movements hesitant yet purposeful. Becky's breath caught in her throat. The young man had Tristan's eyes, a piercing, familiar gaze that made her heart skip a beat. For a moment, she thought she was seeing a ghost, a vision conjured by her grief and the bittersweet emotions of the day. "Becky," Kelly's voice was low, full of reverence. "This is Nathan." Nathan, the name brought back a rush of memories, snippets of conversations Becky had had with Tristan over the years. Nathan was Tristan's best friend, a brother in all but blood who had been studying abroad and whose life had unexpectedly intertwined with Tristan's in a way that went far deeper than she'd ever realized. Nathan approached, his eyes glistening. In his hands, he held something wrapped in velvet, Tristan's favorite pocket watch, the one he'd carried everywhere since he was a teenager. Nathan knelt before Becky, his voice trembling. "Mrs. Reeves, I've carried this watch with me every day since that night. Tristan gave it to me in his final moments. He made me promise I'd be here if this day ever came." Becky gasped, her knees threatening to buckle. Kelly's arm tightened around her waist, holding her steady as the room seemed to close in. Nathan continued, his voice steady despite the tears streaming down his face. "Tristan wanted you to know that even though he couldn't be here himself, he'd always find a way to be with you. He said this watch would remind you of time, of moments lost, yes, but also of every cherished memory you've created." With trembling hands, Becky accepted the watch, pressing it close to her chest as if she could feel Tristan's heartbeat within its ticking. The room was utterly silent, each guest enraptured by the deeply personal moment unfolding before them. In that quiet, Becky felt her son's presence more vividly than ever. Nathan stood and took the seat next to the empty chair, symbolically filling the void left by Tristan's absence. It was as if Tristan had orchestrated this from beyond, sending his best friend to comfort his mother, to make sure she knew she wasn't alone. The ceremony continued, but for Becky, time seemed to stretch and shift. The pain of Tristan's loss would never fully disappear, but in that moment, surrounded by love and support, she felt him near. The empty chair was no longer just a reminder of grief. It was a testament to a bond that transcended time and space. As Becky and Kelly exchanged their vows, the warmth of the room, filled with love, remembrance, and the laughter of family and friends, made her heart swell with hope. She knew that while life would never be the same, it was still rich with unexpected connections, profound love, and meaningful moments that honored Tristan's memory. As the ceremony continued, Becky felt herself enveloped by a sense of peace and connection she hadn't felt in years. Every word of her vows to Kelly resonated with a strength born not just of their love, but of all they had been through together: the loss, the healing, the laughter that returned to her life when she thought she would never smile again. She glanced at Nathan, seated beside the empty chair, and felt a rush of gratitude for his presence, for being the embodiment of Tristan's wish for her happiness. Once the vows were spoken, applause erupted, and the couple kissed, sealing a new chapter of their life together. The air was electric with joy, and Becky swore she felt a subtle breeze pass by, a whisper of Tristan's approval carried on invisible wings. As the guests began to transition from the ceremony to the reception, Nathan approached Becky once more, his eyes still brimming with emotion, but also a hint of nervousness. "There's one more thing," he said quietly, casting a glance at Kelly, who nodded encouragingly. Intrigued, but unsure of what could possibly follow such an already overwhelming day, Becky allowed herself to be guided to a private corner of the garden just beyond the chapel. Nestled within the shaded alcove was a small gathering, a group of people she didn't recognize at first. They turned toward her with soft, welcoming smiles, and she saw that many of them were holding objects she knew well. A sketchbook Tristan had poured hours into, a soccer jersey he once cherished, and even a crumpled paper crane he had made in a fit of boredom during a family picnic. These were Tristan's friends, his confidants, people who had been touched by his light and were determined to carry it forward. One by one, they stepped forward and shared stories, memories of Tristan that Becky had never heard, stories of his kindness, his fierce loyalty, his laughter that could brighten even the darkest day. They spoke of quiet moments when Tristan had lifted them up, of dreams he had shared, of the way he could make everyone around him feel seen and important. For every tear shed, there was laughter. For every aching pang of loss, there was a renewed sense of his enduring impact on the world. The sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow across the garden, and Becky felt a profound shift within her. The pain of losing Tristan would never truly leave. It was woven into the fabric of who she was, but she could now see that her son's love and spirit had not ended with his passing. He had left a legacy that lived on in the people whose lives he had touched, and they, in turn, had come together to honor him and support her on this day of transition and hope. Nathan stepped forward again, holding something new in his hands, a small, young tree sapling. Tristan always talked about leaving something behind that would grow, Nathan said, his voice thick with emotion. We thought this would be the perfect way to honor him. Tears streamed down Becky's face as she and Nathan knelt together to plant the sapling in the garden. The guests formed a circle around them, and in that moment, the act became something sacred, an expression of love that was rooted in the earth, destined to grow and reach toward the heavens. As she touched the soil, Becky whispered a silent message to her son. "Thank you for showing me that love endures, always." The reception that followed was filled with dancing, laughter, and moments that glimmered like stars in the night sky. Becky danced with Nathan, with Kelly, with her friends, and even with strangers who had come to share in this extraordinary day. Every smile, every heartfelt word was a celebration not just of new beginnings, but of the enduring bond between a mother and her son, a love that time, distance, or even death could not erase. As the evening drew to a close, Becky found herself standing by the sapling, now swaying gently in the night breeze. She felt Kelly's arms wrap around her, and she leaned into him, her heart lighter and fuller than it had been in years. Above, the stars twinkled, and she imagined Tristan among them, watching over her with pride and joy. Life would never be perfect. It would be messy and unpredictable, full of moments of joy and sorrow intertwined. But Becky knew now, without a shadow of a doubt, that even in her darkest hours, love would find a way to shine through. It would carry her forward, guided by memories, by those who loved her, and by the silent, ever-present spirit of her beloved son. As the guests slowly made their way back to the reception hall, Becky lingered by the young tree sapling, her fingers gently brushing its delicate leaves. She closed her eyes, feeling a surge of warmth and connection that reminded her of holding Tristan's small hand when he was a child. In that quiet moment, it was as if time had folded in on itself, and she could sense every heartbeat, every laugh, every fleeting moment they had shared. "Hey, Mom," the voice, so soft and familiar, seemed to float on the wind. Becky's breath caught, her eyes snapping open. She glanced around, but of course, there was no one there. And yet, she smiled, tears streaming down her face. "I hear you," she whispered. "I'll always hear you." The night was alive with music, and Becky knew it was time to return to her guests, to celebrate the new chapter she and Kelly were beginning. As she made her way back to the reception, the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses swelled, a testament to life's resilience and joy. But just as she stepped inside, another surprise awaited her. In the middle of the dance floor, a large screen had been set up. Kelly stood beside it, his eyes bright with anticipation. "Becky," he called, beckoning her over. I wanted to share this with everyone. It's a gift from Tristan that he never got to deliver." Confused but intrigued, Becky stepped forward. The guests gathered around, curiosity lighting up their faces. The screen flickered to life, and there, smiling back at them, was Tristan. The recording had been made just a few weeks before his passing, and as his familiar smile filled the room, Becky felt both the sting of grief and a deep, soul-nourishing joy. "Hey, Mom," Tristan said, his voice warm and full of the teasing lilt she had always loved. "I wanted to record this in case I wasn't there to say it myself. First of all, don't cry. You're probably crying already, aren't you?" The room erupted in gentle laughter. Even in death, Tristan had a way of bringing lightness to every situation. "Mom, you're the strongest person I know," he continued, his tone more serious now. "You've given me more love than anyone could ask for, and I want you to know that no matter where I am, I'm always with you, always." The video shifted, showing Tristan playing guitar, a talent he'd nurtured since he was a child. He began to strum a familiar melody, one that had played countless times in their home. As the chords filled the room, Becky felt herself transported back in time to family nights, to Tristan's impromptu concerts, to moments of pure, unfiltered love. Then his voice, strong, unwavering, and achingly real, began to sing. It was a song he had written for her, one she had only heard him hum, but had never known the full lyrics to. The words spoke of gratitude, of the lessons she'd taught him, of their laughter and their tears. It was a love letter in melody, a final gift from a son to his mother. By the time the song ended, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Becky's hands trembled as she reached for Kelly, who wrapped her in his arms. They stood together, swaying to the echoes of the song that had already become etched in their hearts. Nathan approached, wiping his eyes. "He wanted you to have this," he said, handing her a small flash drive. "He made more recordings, stories, messages, songs. He wanted you to have all of it." Becky clutched the flash drive to her chest, feeling the weight of Tristan's love in every byte of data. It was more than a gift, it was a lifeline, a reminder that even in his absence, he had left pieces of himself behind to guide her through. As the evening stretched on, the guests danced and celebrated under a blanket of stars. Becky found herself swept into dance after dance, sometimes with Kelly, sometimes with friends, and sometimes with strangers who felt like family. She laughed until her sides hurt and cried until her heart felt lighter. The empty chair remained in its place, now surrounded by candles and flowers, a sacred space within the revelry. At one point, Becky found herself standing beside Nathan again. "You know," she said, a small smile playing on her lips, "I think Tristan would have loved this chaos." Nathan nodded, his eyes twinkling. He absolutely would. He'd be the first one on the dance floor, probably starting a conga line. They both laughed, and for a moment, it was as if Tristan himself was there, urging them not to dwell on the pain, but to embrace the love and life that still surrounded them. As the night finally wound down, Becky and Kelly stood together beneath the star-strewn sky. The sapling swayed gently in the breeze, and the candles around Tristan's chair flickered softly. Hand in hand, they made a silent vow to carry Tristan's memory forward with every step they took, to honor his life by living fully and loving fiercely. "Thank you for this day," Becky whispered to the stars. "Thank you for every moment." In that quiet, sacred space, she felt an unbreakable bond of love that transcended time and space, woven into every beat of her heart. She knew that, no matter what lay ahead, she would never walk alone. Tristan's spirit would always be there, in the laughter, in the music, in the love that surrounded her, forever. The following morning, the sky broke with a soft blush of dawn, and Becky awoke with a calmness that felt unfamiliar, yet deeply comforting. She turned to find Kelly still asleep beside her, his chest rising and falling in the steady rhythm of peace. The events of the previous day washed over her again, the love, the laughter, the unexpected surprises that had honored Tristan's life. She had faced her deepest pain and come through it surrounded by love. Today felt different. Today, she felt ready to move forward, carrying Tristan's memory not as a weight, but as a source of light. She dressed quietly, slipping out into the garden where the young tree sapling stood, its leaves catching the first rays of sunlight. She knelt beside it, pressing her fingers into the soft earth as if to feel the pulse of life running through its roots. "Good morning, Tristan," she whispered, a smile touching her lips. "I hope you liked the party." Becky closed her eyes, imagining his voice in her ear, his laughter ringing out as he playfully teased her. In her heart, she felt the response, "You did good, Mom. You always do." Her peace was soon interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Becky turned to see Nathan approaching, a warm smile on his face and a steaming mugs of coffee in hand. "I thought you might need a morning pick-me-up," he said, handing her a mug. The steam curled between them, carrying the rich, familiar scent that reminded her of countless mornings spent with Tristan. "Thank you," she said, taking a grateful sip. They stood together in companionable silence, watching as the day brightened. Birds chirped overhead, and a soft breeze rustled the leaves of the sapling. It was a perfect moment of stillness, one that felt like a gift. "Becky," Nathan began, his tone more serious now, "I wanted to ask you something." He hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "Would it be okay if I stayed in touch? I know I'm not him, but I feel like there's more we can do to honor his memory together." Becky felt a lump rise in her throat. She set down her mug and reached for Nathan's hand, squeezing it tightly. "Of course," she said, "you were like a brother to him. You're always welcome here, always." Nathan nodded, his eyes glassy with emotion. Together, they began to talk about Tristan, about their favorite memories, and about ways to keep his spirit alive. Ideas flowed easily between them. They spoke of a charity in Tristan's name to support causes he cared deeply about. They imagined gatherings where people could share stories, laughter, and love, all in the name of a young man who had left the world far too soon, but whose impact would continue to ripple outward. As they talked, Kelly joined them, drawn by the warmth of their conversation. Together, the three of them mapped out a future where grief was transformed into hope, where Tristan's legacy became a beacon of light for others facing their own battles. They envisioned helping struggling students, organizing community events, and even creating a music program to honor Tristan's love of playing guitar. As the morning stretched on, guests who had stayed overnight began to trickle out of the house, stopping to share quiet goodbyes and heartfelt words with Becky and Kelly. Each person seemed to carry a piece of Tristan with them, a memory, a laugh, a story that would be cherished. In the days that followed, life began to settle back into its rhythm. Becky found herself busier than ever, coordinating plans for the charity, connecting with people who had known Tristan, and discovering new ways to channel her grief into purpose. There were difficult moments, of course, nights when the silence was too loud, when the ache of missing him felt like an open wound. But each time, she reminded herself that she was not alone. She had Kelly, Nathan, and a growing circle of friends who had loved Tristan deeply. Together, they formed a patchwork of support, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, light could be found. One evening, as she worked late at her desk, Becky heard a soft knock on the door. She looked up to find Nathan standing there, a hesitant smile on his face. "I was going through some of Tristan's old things," he said, stepping inside. "I found this, and I thought you'd want to see it." He handed her a small, well-worn notebook. Becky opened it, her heart leaping as she recognized her son's handwriting. The pages were filled with sketches, poems, and fragments of thoughts, a window into Tristan's soul. As she flipped through it, she found a page titled Future Dreams. It listed things he wanted to do: travel the world, play his music for a crowd, make his mom proud. Tears blurred her vision. "He did, you know," she whispered. "He made me so proud." Nathan nodded, his own eyes shimmering. He knew. In that moment, Becky understood that their journey of healing would never truly end. There would always be new ways to remember, to honor, to feel connected. Life would continue to unfold, with all its beauty and pain intertwined. But now, there was purpose, there was love, and there was a growing sense of peace. Together, they placed the notebook on the mantel, next to the flash drive containing Tristan's recordings and a framed photo of him laughing, eyes bright with mischief. It became a sacred space, a reminder that while grief was heavy, love was infinitely more powerful. As the days turned into weeks and then months, Becky continued to carry Tristan's memory forward. She found strength in moments she never thought possible, joy in unexpected places, and a deep, abiding connection with those around her. Through every triumph and every tear, she knew that her son was with her, guiding her, loving her, and reminding her that life, even with all its imperfections, was meant to be lived fully. Underneath the tree sapling, now growing taller each day, Becky often sat and spoke to Tristan. She shared her fears, her triumphs, her gratitude. She told him about the lives they were changing in his honor and the joy they were finding together. And in the rustle of leaves, the warmth of the sun, and the quiet moments of reflection, she felt his answer, "I'm proud of you too, Mom. Keep going." And so she did, one day, one moment, one breath at a time, carrying his light within her, always.